Folks, thank you so much for joining in today. We have got some items for you need to be on top of, give you some insights, and you'll be able to talk and discuss among friends and foe alike. But some amazing stuff happened. You got to see and you got to hear right now what's happening in Iran. Some troubling new developments there. You want to hear about the stock markets, what's happening, and how about the real estate market, what's going on there, and look at what Gen Z are doing as opposed to Gen Alpha. Let's jump right into it. Well, the discussions, the rhetoric has gone up, and the U.S. has saying in no uncertain terms they're going to come down harder and harder now on Iran. Iran is attacking more ships in the Strait of Hormuz, and Iran is using one of their terrorist outlier groups, the Houthis, who are situated in Yemen. Remember, Iran has been exporting terrorism for decades around the world with very little media opposition to that. Iran supports and arms Hezbollah to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars in Lebanon to allow Hezbollah to continue to fire rockets as they've done unendingly for decades, for 2 decades. I've been to the border there. I've seen it. It's happening. So here, Iran continuing to send millions of dollars and armaments to their terrorist enclaves in the Middle East, and those are the Houthis are taking up increasing attacks on Saudi Arabia, trying to ignite the entire region. The discussion now is very clear. There is, as we've talked about, as you may recall, there's an island called Kharg Island right off the shoreline, belongs to Iran, right off Iranian shoreline. If that island was to be knocked out, it's about 90% of the petrochemical and energy-based refineries and facilities all on one island. Many people have been saying to the U.S., you've got to knock that out. That will bring the regime to its knees. U.S. being reluctant to do that because if it gets knocked out, that severely interrupts power sources and energy to the people of Iran, over 90 million people there that would literally be starving. And yet it seems to be coming down to the regime is not going to cease its attacks on other countries unless something drastic happens. So all the radar up there for Kharg Island, the United Nations, very interesting. I'm always fascinated at the things the UN protests on, and they're protesting about the conflict. But for years, there was never any protest coming out of the United Nations relative to Iran financing terrorist operations around the world, relative to the Iranian regime bombing and killing in other countries, and now with the regime itself on the verge of being toppled in Iran, or at least the leadership there. You have the U.S. protesting and saying, hey, all the fighting should stop. Very interesting to see that happen. This all affects votes depending where you live. I can tell as a recovering politician, all world affairs come down to, for many politicians, whether they're going to get reelected or not. And an amazing admission has just come out in the United States. And this is by Senator Elisa Slotkin from Michigan. And as you may know, there's something called the Save America Act. This is a piece of voter legislation. It's actually supposed to be supporting legislation that's already in place, but it's underlining and it's requiring people who are voting in U.S. elections, and you have to be a citizen to vote, to produce identification. I mean, you have to produce identification in so many different areas of life. And yet the Democrats are really opposing this. It's coming back for some kind of a vote in some form because it got knocked down in the Senate when 4 Republicans voted against requiring people to have ID, proper ID, when they go to vote. But the admission by Senator Slotkin here is very interesting because she said, if in the U.S., if they have legislation that requires people to be identified, to produce identification to vote, then Democrats would lose elections. What she's saying is there's so many illegal voters voting for them that they might not get elected if the system was fixed. It's really the first really public admission by a high-ranking Democrat that the Democrats, and this is the same in Canada with left-leaning groups being generally opposed to restrictions on voting. There's not an act before the government per se in Canada on this, but the left, the Liberals, the Socialists finally admitting they need those illegal votes to win elections. So we'll see where that goes. The Alliance for Defending Freedom in the U.S., Kristen Wagner, she heads it up. She's the CFO. And as we talked about last week, they won. It was a years-long battle, went all the way to the Supreme Court, but defending the right of states to say no to biological men in women's sports and to say no to biological men, regardless of how they have altered themselves surgically, in women's private spaces. And that was a very important vote, obviously. But there's 23 states in the United States where, despite 80% support among any population group, Canada and the US, where you talk about this, 80% of voters are saying, yes, we support the protection of women in sports. We support the protection of women and girls in locker rooms and private spaces. But some of these politicians on the left are stubbornly clinging to this transgender, the militarization, really, you can use that in a word as an allegory, the militarization, the weaponization of this issue. And so the battles continue in the states themselves. And the Alliance for Defending Freedom is going to take this battle now on a state-by-state basis to the 23 states that still do not respect women, do not respect protecting women and girls. And they talking about one case, there's many of these cases where a 16-year-old girl, a wrestler, female wrestler in female wrestling, had to contend with a huge transgendered, biologically male opponent who actually, she's accusing him of sexually assaulted her actually during the competition itself. She has strong evidence of that. So anyway, the battle is going to wage on a state-by-state basis. Well, there's an imam in Texas, Omar Suleiman. He's president. The reason I'm talking about this, he's president of the Institute president of the Institute for Islamic Research. Very well thought of imam, or up until recently. He has been at times the person to open in prayer at the opening of some of the legislative sessions. And he has come out with really frightening and frankly disgusting remarks about the death of Lindsey Graham, the senator who just recently died. This continues. People who are celebrating and rejoicing and posting the most horrific memes and other things about the death of a politician. Joy Reid is still getting at The View, is still continuing her direction along this route, and really disturbing. We've talked about it for a couple of days, how it's one thing to be opposed to your political adversaries. It's another thing to be rejoicing in their death. I can tell you that the senior Trudeau, Pierre Trudeau, was Prime Minister of Canada. He got elected back in the late 60s, and I probably opposed almost every resolution and bill and piece of legislation he brought forward under his government. I opposed many of them. But when he died, I joined many who also opposed them in giving condolences and giving a speech in his regard, not supporting his policies, but respecting him as a person. This is a very disturbing trend. The public exhilaration and exaltation, not just about people dying, but about people being killed. So we're going to watch and see if that continues. I think, unfortunately, that it will. To distract a little bit from that news, Dan Wakeford used to be the co-editor in charge of People magazine. He's got his own celebrity magazine now. He's had it for a few years, and he's been covering the meeting with Prince Harry. And is Prince Harry going to meet with King Charles, etc.? Well, as you know, he did. Prince Harry met, brought the grandkids. From all intents and purposes, it was a lovely meeting. Prince Harry over there in Great Britain, in the UK, because of his position with the Invictus Group. This is a group who helps and celebrates wounded veterans. And interesting what is being reported, Dan Wakeford is saying that all of this stuff about Harry and Meghan being multi-gazillionaires through all of the their behind the scenes stories that they did that upset the palace so much. The Netflix documentary, Harry's book called Spare, the interview with Oprah, which they said pretty outrageous things about their own family in public. Apparently, they didn't get as much money. It was said that they got $100 million from Netflix, they got $20 million from Spotify, and now it's being said, no, it wasn't that much. It was like only 60 million, and it was only 5 million from Spotify. So I don't know if that's going to get them a lot of sympathy, Harry and Meghan, but the discussion remains. But the key underlying part of that story is that Harry wants to move back. That's the suggestion. He's not saying he dislikes Americans or dislikes California, but things in California just not quite what he had hoped for. So we'll see and watch that for those of you who are the royal watchers in Canada, the US, and around the world. Gregory Zuckerman over at the Wall Street Journal is reporting because there's today we see in the markets it's being seen as a sell-off of shares, especially by companies that have been growing, especially AI companies. And is this a sign that they're panicking? And the case being made is no, these companies have grown so much that now they need cash. And because there's so many shares available on the market to purchase for these AI related companies, that though the shares are still going up, they're not going up as much because so many people are jumping into the market. So many shares are then being dumped out on the market for people to buy that the value drops. Anytime you have more of something in a marketplace, the price will tend to go down. When there's less of something, scarcity, the price tends to go up. And the case that Zuckerman is making is this is a sign actually that things are quite healthy, and that the AI companies especially want to grow even more. They want straight cash even more, as the individual share prices aren't quite as stratospheric. And so he's saying, and others in Wall Street are saying, this is not a panic, it's actually a sign of a strong economy. But as with anything, because companies usually, often what they will do is just simply buy back some of their own shares to keep the price solid, and they are not having to do that. They are selling because they need the cash, because they want to expand even more, and the price increase is simply not as much. But Benjamin Curry over at the Daily Mail, who does a lot of commentary on what's happening in the stock market, he's making a different case. He's actually predicting a very soon a severe drop, if not a crash in the market, and he's using the company called Oracle. Oracle is huge, and they've been buying huge, and they've actually staked all of their future in terms of their own purchasing relative to AI value. And because they've taken as a company, as an investment company, this somewhat rare decision to almost put all their eggs in one basket. Standard & Poor's, remember Standard & Poor's is one of the rating agencies that rates different companies, so that possible investors can have an idea, is this a company worth looking at or investing in? And they have downgraded Oracle. Shares have dropped 50%. On July 9th, the shares dropped in Oracle 50%. And so some are making the case, like Benjamin Curry is making the case, that this is a sign of an imminent, severe drop, if not a crash in the market. Let's see who's right on that as that debate wages on. I'm leaning towards not a crash. I'm leaning towards the first hypothesis. We'll see what happens there. And in terms of worldwide tensions, of course, lots of focus on Iran. But a report just came out yesterday, and this is from CIA and from other countries, actually, whose satellite networks have zeroed in on something kind of interesting happening in the desert, a remote desert area of China called Taklamka in China. And there we can see, and they've got the imagery now, satellite imagery, exact replicas, for instance, of American jet planes and American large Navy vessels, even aircraft carrier types. And the Chinese have built these huge replicas, and they are using it for their target practice with missiles. Remember, with the potential of missiles is to have not necessarily gigantic, all-consuming, as they call them, carpet bombs or bunker busters, but to have missiles that can go great distance and strike with real precision at the critical areas on a ship or on a particular target. And interesting to see China just being very clear about the fact they are figuring out how to better hit U.S. ships. That could be also a bit of a propaganda thing on China, but it's out there and it's got people very much concerned. We're looking at that. David Gordon, a journalist, is reporting on a 63-page study. It's going to the United Nations, and it's a study of a number of NGOs, non-government organizations, and this is done across Canada, where it is claiming the people who are doing it are all insiders. They work at some of these NGOs. There's 70 people, former and current staff within these NGOs, and they've been quietly accumulating over the last few years very clear cases of anti-Semitism within the NGOs, within these non-government organizations, which are supposed to be humanitarian or supposed to help all people in situations in distress. And it's a very heavily compiled report about instances of anti-Semitism. And these are among well-known NGOs, Doctors Without Borders. They have discovered, anyway, according to the allegation, a lot of cases anti-Israel and anti-Semitic. Amnesty International, the same thing is on that list. So let's see where that goes. It does reflect the rise in anti-Semitism that is disturbing. I just published on my X account. You can go there to see it. There's an Edmonton City councillor who is known to be leftist and very so-called progressive. Progressive actually means regressive in real language. But yeah, he published a piece in which he was suggesting that if you live in Palestinian areas, your children being born have the highest rate of being killed anywhere in the world or dying. It's a complete lie, complete fabrication. It's anti-Semitic to the extreme, and it's these types of ill-founded. I just published something on that. For instance, I went on the real stats about highest mortality rate in the world, which countries, and unfortunately has nothing, or fortunately has nothing to do with Israel. It seems to be topping the list are Muslim countries, and I'm just stating that as a fact. I'm not trying to tie a religion to that. Somalia being way up there on the top, 99% Muslim in terms of infant deaths. So apparently now, because a number of us have raised this issue, Michael Jantz has taken down that item that he posted, and real pressure being put on him to apologize. We'll see if he does. You can check that out on my account on X or go to stockwellday.com as you already have. The October referendum that's coming up in Alberta, all the focus there has been on the so-called separatist question. Remember, it's not a vote saying yes or no, should we separate, but Albertans are being asked, should we pursue this discussion? Should we say to our provincial government, yes, pursue the possibilities of separating, and should they do that or not? But 5 of the 10, there's 10 items that are not all directly related. 5 of those 10 items all have to do with immigration, and should there be more provincial control of immigration? There's one that says, should you have to wait as an immigrant, you have to wait 12 months before you can collect social services. And these type of referendum questions on immigration are being somewhat clouded by the fact that the separation question is there. So watch for that to continue. We've just started seeing immigrant groups throughout the province starting to raise concerns about it. So again, watch for the politicians. Many of them will will raise one finger to the wind and see which way it's blowing. But in Alberta, they tend to be a little more focused on trying to do what's right. Let's see how that resolves and how it moves along. In Toronto, there's been a fascinating report just released. The increase, it's a real surge over the last couple of years in demand for gun licenses and for handgun licenses here. Huge surge in requests for people wanting to get their license so that they can become expertise. Sarah McMillan, the journalist, is reporting on this, and she says the highest number of increase for requests to get a gun license is among women and among so-called diverse groups, suggesting a need not just to be a more accomplished sports enthusiast, but there's some safety and security questions that are giving rise there. So very interesting phenomenon. The Canadian Real Estate Association, they had said at the start of the year that we were going to see a slight uptick in terms of real estate activity generally. Now they're saying a slight downtick is what they're talking about, even though the Bank of Canada has announced that they're going to hold the rate for now at 2.25%. The Canadian Real Estate Association is looking at the effects of inflation, looking at all of these things and how it is having somewhat of a dampening effect on people buying houses. Remember, folks, here's the skill testing question for those of you who are regular watchers and listeners. What is the single greatest cause of inflation anywhere? You got it. It's government spending borrowed money. That inflates the cost of money more than any other thing, more than the Iranian war, more than any other thing. So when you hear your politician, local or provincial or federal, and I can tell you, I've been there at both levels, nothing a politician loves to do more than to announce new spending on something. Well, sometimes spending increases are required, but keep in mind, every time you hear that about new spending, that means it's going to be more difficult for you to buy groceries, more difficult for you to buy a home. Every single time you look in that smiling face of that politician who's saying he or she's going to spend more money on this or that, just know your groceries are going to cost more. Single greatest cause of inflation in Toronto, something that isn't increasing. Toronto itself is shrinking for the first time in decades, and Toronto has always boasted saying that they are the most dynamic cities in North America. In some years have been number one in terms of growth, and this year's report shows that they are shrinking. People are leaving. A mass exodus in numbers? No. But you go back to 2020 when there were 6.5 million people in Toronto and the immediate surrounding area, and they were boasting about Toronto being so wonderful. Everybody was moving there, fastest growing city in North America outside of Phoenix and Dallas at the time, and now shrinking, and people are trying to get a handle on the reasons for it. Taxes is one, especially municipal taxes, municipal regulations going through the roof. Increasingly, folks, I'm telling you, mayors and councillors of any city, though they are very maybe well-intended, they are completely beholden to their administrations, to the officials within that particular city. Those cities will always make the case for more spending, and local politicians do not like to challenge the staff at City Hall. So it does have an effect, just like we've finally seeing in California, cities like Los Angeles, cities like San Francisco. Yes, people will leave. And so some people say, well, let them go. It's probably just conservatives who are leaving anyway. It is generally the people who pay the taxes who leave. It's generally the people who open businesses and are entrepreneurs and hire people by the thousands who leave. And that always leaves a city more vulnerable. So think about that. You folks in Toronto, are you happy with the taxes, with the regulation, and with the runaway crime, unfortunately, that is in so many of the large cities? We'll see where that goes. Well, in a very rare situation, a teacher, this is in British Columbia, has actually lost their certification. And this rarely happens because teachers' unions, especially in BC, the BC teachers' unions, no matter what the charge is, almost no matter what the charge is against the teacher, they defend them almost to the death. And so just yesterday it was announced that teacher has lost their certification. And the first areas of wrongdoing of this with this teacher, and I'm just going to, I'm not going to drill into the details, but let's just call it inappropriate conduct with students. Inappropriate conduct with students by a teacher. The first complaints going back as far as 2006. And even in those early years, the teacher being warned, the teacher in some place being sanctioned, but the teachers union always defending them against being fired or let go. And these, since 2006, the amount of complaints have increased. This is for over 20 years. Finally, that particular teacher has lost his certification. So it's in a way unfortunate to see teachers unions always defending. Sometimes it is felt defending to far too extreme a position some of these teachers that maybe shouldn't be there. If you want to really talk about some interesting conflict, if you're watching the World Cup and FIFA, Wednesday, the big match in the quarterfinals, Argentina versus UK. Argentina versus the UK is seen as, with sportcasters around the world in all sports, the most heated rivalry of any sports franchise, baseball, hockey, whatever it might be. A lot of that goes back to as far as 1982 with the Falklands War. Some of you weren't around then, or the war was not your fault. I'm not going to hold you accountable for it. But where the UK did invade the Falkland Islands, and the Falkland Islands claimed by Argentina, that created, well, a lot of blood was shed actually, but it created bad blood. There's been that adds to the intense rivalry between those two countries. And the situations that have come up in games between these two teams over the years, back in '86, again, some of you who are like me, who were actually alive then, will remember Diego Maradona, of course, the absolute star of soccer at the time. This is in the '86, and it was match, UK versus Argentina. It was called the Hand of God moment. The game was very close. He went up in the air to apparently head the ball in, but it was clearly seen later that he assisted the ball going in with his left hand. But in those days, they didn't have the type of video action replay that they have today. So the referee didn't see it. He called it a goal, and it was allowed. And it was allowed to stand. Since there's been a lot of science and research that shows that Diego, in fact, did nudge that in with his hand. When he was asked about it, he just kind of smiled and he said, "It was indeed the hand of God." So, I mean, these are just elements of the rivalry between them. David Beckham, actually, back in '98, the famous red card movement. For those of you who've seen the David Beckham documentary, it's kind of fascinating. What happened was he got hit pretty hard from behind, knocked flat on his face. And as the guy was going by him, he kind of, while he's on the ground, he kind of kicked out with his leg, almost to try and hit the guy who smashed him down. He got a red card for that. It was highly disputed that he would get a red card. That meant he was out of the game. And in soccer, as you may know, if you get a penalty, you are out for the game, and you cannot replace that person. You cannot bring the person or any person back in. So England, UK had to play the rest of the game with 10 men against 11. And at that professional level, I can tell you that is deadly. The UK lost the game, and actually David Beckham was just trashed as the grand betrayer of Britain. I mean, at times he had to go into hiding. His life was threatened for being so silly as to lash out with a kick and get the penalty. So again, that's between UK and Argentina. And then back in 2002, Beckham getting somewhat redeemed, because again, against Argentina, this time he gets a penalty shot and puts it in. That helped to win the game. So watch for this game today. The rivalry is very tight. What else is happening? You've heard a lot of the financial stories relative to the World Cup. If you haven't heard of Panini stickers, you're going to be hearing more and more. The Panini company, which makes a number of paper type advertising products, way back in 1970, and this was when the World Cup was being hosted in Mexico, they started developing these stickers. It's like collecting hockey cards, like we always used to in the kids, but these stickers would go into your album, and you would try and get stickers from every player that was playing in the World Cup. Now there's 48 teams. There used to be 32 teams, 18 players on a team, hundreds of stickers to be got. And I'll tell you what, the enthusiasm and the fanatics around this is almost as well. They say as much as baseball cards or hockey cards. And for instance, this last Sunday, among those who are deemed actual Panini card traders, 4,446 people swapping these cards at 4 different locations, and the Guinness Book of Records says it's the highest record ever. Sometimes it's kids, sometimes it's adults trying to get those stickers of each player, and because only a limited number are made, you can't even buy in some cases, so you'll do trades. And that's what's been happening in 2023 auction. One of the Messi stickers that people were trying to get, Lionel Messi, sold for $139,000. So Watch what's going on there, you with the Panini stickers. Gen Z trends. We've talked about this a bit, and it's really remarkable now. Gen Z who are abandoning the thought of going to university and pursuing the trades, whether it's welders or whether it's construction. That's up now. Trade schools for Gen Z registering up 20%, 20% increase in enrollment over the last 4 years because they see that this is an area that, in fact, AI will not be able to infiltrate as much. New Yorker magazine talks about the fact that though Gen Z seems to be pushing back against AI, even against AI projects, which can deliver fabulous benefits to the human race, Gen Alpha, that's the real young crew, the little kids growing up, they are so surrounded, of course, by AI. They have absolutely no aversion or concern about it, and it's AI companies are sort of taking the position of, yeah, okay, there's some opposition now among Gen Z. The older ones, older people don't even understand it. Gen Alpha is coming to save the day for AI, and that does appear to be the case as the trend line over the years ahead. And as much as people say they're not watching, they're not as glued. I just want to report again. We talked about this last week. Dazed magazine is pointing to the fact, new figures on number of people watching the series Love Island, and they say they're doing it sort of. They become immersed in the sociological dilemmas that are being faced by the young, very attractive, and somewhat sensual actors in this Love Island, and that is increasing, and people making their determinations on how they're going to handle themselves in their own affairs, if I can use that word, romantically, taking their lead from a show called Love Island. Very interesting. The Pope has come out now with calling a new level, wants to see a new level of respect for all life. As you recall, he's been getting some criticism for how he has opposed, it seemed, just taking one side and opposing some of the conflicts that are going on around the world, like in Iran, for instance. And he says it's all about life from conception until natural death. So he's made a very strong statement on that. And coming out of the so-called West Bank, the Palestinian area, there's only now one significantly Christian community left in the Palestinian or West Bank areas. It's the community of Taiba. As we know, but as rarely gets reported, the Christian population in the Palestinian areas in the West Bank continues to go down as Christians face increased discrimination from the Palestinians and from the Gazans. And they've made a very clear statement that they feel they are called to be there by God, and they are going to stay there, and they're asking for prayer from around the world, the Taiba community in the West Bank. Folks, those are things and thoughts for today. Thanks for tuning in. Talk to you tomorrow.